Recent research reveals that 90% of school leaders say building trust is important to their mission, yet only half were confident in their ability to do so. Additional research shows that high levels of trust creates significant benefits. But despite these benefits, few schools or businesses intentionally invest time, energy, or resources to develop trust in their leaders. Let's have ourselves a pocket-sized pep talk because I have a guest today who's here to help.
A pocket-sized pep talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Dr. Toby Travis, is the founder of Trust Ed, a framework for school improvement focused on developing trusted leaders. In addition, he's an executive consultant, he's an adjunct professor, an experienced teacher, and administrator of PS 12 schools. His new book is Trust Ed, The Bridge to School Improvement, and we're going to talk about it. Welcome to the show, Toby.
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, it's good to be here, and we're talking about trust, which from my side of things, the sales side of things, what else is there? I'll tell you a funny story, and then I want to hear about this book. I was on a development team some decades back with Xerox, and we built an amazing sales model. And we had steps for everything. We had steps for urgency. We had opening tactics, closing tactics, objection handling, product recommendations, you name it. We built steps for it because we were Xerox and we processed everything. And the only thing that we fell asleep on was trust. We kind of looked at each other and went, well, people know how to do that. We don't need to build a process for that. And what a huge blunder. We since fixed that up, but if we don't have trust, we don't have anything. So let's start there. Let's start with your work with school leaders regarding trust. We've seen, we know some of the positive effects it's had. But talk to me about that because I'm not sure everybody understands. Your sales guy today understands, but tell me about the positive effects that trust has.
That's really interesting. So decades of research on this now. So this isn't just our good thinking or, our observation.
A hobby? You got a hobby there, do you?
Right. Yeah. The number one indicator of successful schools is trusted leadership. And what's really interesting, Rob, is when you look at the research, it doesn't seem to matter how you want to define school success. This also goes for business success as well. But the focus of this book and most of my work is focused on schools. So how would you define school success? So typically we talk about student achievement, it's kind of the number one thing that comes up. But from a school administrator's point of view, there's other really important levels of success as well. Teacher retention, extremely critical right now. The level of community support, volunteerism. There's been several studies on the use of discretionary time and energy. And when there are high levels of trust and leadership, there's tons of volunteerism. The community gets behind the school, et cetera. Especially for private school owners and administrators, bottom line, financially, schools are more financially stable when there's high levels of trust. And what's interesting, again, in all these different ways that you can measure success in a school, whether it's student achievement, retention rates, et cetera, there's a direct correlation to the level of trust in the leadership.
Wow. And boy, if we weren't convinced before, we should be convinced now. That is achievement, that's retention, which is huge. Financial stability, that's amazing. For me, it trust in sales, opens the door to earn the right to ask more challenging questions. It opens the door to go deeper. But you're just ticking them off. That's
We've
amazing.
Even seen improvements in extra and co-curricular activities. Student athletes perform better if they trust the leadership.
Right.
students perform better in performance type, whether it's a musical, whether it's math competitions, whether it's athletics, if they trust the brand. And here you're a sales guy. So, if they have this affinity of high level of trust to the school's logo, we've even seen studies where if the school's logo, is on a bottle of water or on a pen when they're taking a test, they actually perform better. I mean, it is the issue. And as you mentioned in the opening comments, the real tragedy of this is we know this, the research supports it tremendously. Very, very, very few administrators in schools are spending energy and time to get this right.
Okay, so let's go there. That's important to me. So or either that or we sing Kumbaya. I'm with you. And yeah, you had me at hello, but I run into it also. So talk to me about some of the obstacles that you had to overcome. I mean, where some of these pain points are, because I can't find a negative. I can't find an argument against it. And yes, yet it's one of those things where I told you on a development team, we completely ignored it. So where are the obstacles coming from?
It's because people think of it as a soft skill, right? There's kind of this idea that either you have it or you don't. And there's an element of truth to that. But what we know empirically is you can assess it, right? You can measure it. You can intentionally develop it. You can repair it if it's broken. And there is a caveat to that, and we can talk about that if you want. We talk about steps for repairing trust.
I'm heading there.
But
yeah, keep going.
It is possible. It's doable, and it's the work that must be done, or we're just spinning our wheels. And in the school world, one of the big complaints you hear from teachers and even administrators is, oh, there's always something new. There's always some new initiative, right? We're rolling out some new strategy, and it lasts for a little bit and then it fails. Well, the reason is because we're not dealing with the root issue. And what we've discovered is in schools where there's high levels of trust and confidence between school leadership and school teachers and parents and students, you don't need the best strategies. You don't need the technology. You don't need the glamorous facilities. You have amazing levels of achievement because you get high levels of student engagement in environments of trust. And that's the key to student success.
Yeah. One of the things that I appreciate talking with you today is I like your message, but I really love your energy. And we need more of that on something like this. Because in the business world, as a corporate trainer, I've always referred to it as the flavor of the month syndrome, where we begin to numb people because we have ideas, but we don't implement the ideas. So, and I think that's kind of what you're nibbling at, which is not here, but we have kind of a path of all sorts of processes and ideas that people did get away with winking at each other and go, relax, it'll be gone in 6 months. But we're talking about trust. I'm not so sure we need to be winking on that one. And there's another piece that you hit there that I don't know if you saw me, but I winced while you were talking. And for those of you who are listening, you can't see either one of us wince. But I got to tell you that I think the root of so many issues is those 2 words you used, which are soft skills. I will tell you that I am on a one-man crusade. Join me if you wish, but I'm on a crusade to actually no longer even use those words. I actually renamed them performance skills. And because soft skills tends to diminish the skills. And as a guy who spent 12 years now volunteering and helping people in career transition, I'm usually, before the pandemic, I was in rooms typically with 150, 250 people, not 6. No one was in there because their hard skills failed them. Okay. It wasn't because they couldn't count fast enough. It's because they couldn't get to an authentic voice. They couldn't bond with their team. And so it is interesting that once again, performance skills rears its head.
But Rob, don't you also think so, especially as it gets higher up in the ladder, as it were, whether it's a corporate setting or in the school setting? So like, okay, I'm a superintendent of schools. And so when I get hired for that job, they just kind of assume, well, hey, he's got the degree, He just knows how to do it. So they don't think about investing continually into the professional development and ongoing investment of developing trust in that administrator or in those principals. Says, no, this is what we paid them the money for. They've got it. And most, as you cited at the beginning, yeah, but well, 90% or more realize, no, it's the thing I need. Only about half think they're doing it well. And really, we don't have a good study that shows us even what percentage of those are actually doing something intentionally and ongoing. I suspect it's in the single digits because I constantly talk to school administrators and I ask them, so what's your plan for developing, ensuring, repairing, and maintaining trust in your school leadership team? And they look at me with glossy eyes. It's like, no plan.
Wow. You know, at Xerox, and I've been hired as a consultant and to help companies because they say, you know, and I was a quality trainer. One of the things I did for them, and we were very successful with it. So companies came to Xerox, and they still. I've left Xerox 30 years ago. I still get asked, how did they do it? How does Xerox implement everything that they do? And I told them, well, I can teach you in like a half a day, or I can give it to you in one sentence. And the sentence was, it was a condition of employment. We weren't given the option of, hey, if you like this quality improvement thing, why don't you give it a try? Problem solving would be nice as well. And that sales training program went through. What the hey? No, it was a condition of employment, and we took it very, very seriously. So let's stay on this. I know that you've assembled some key elements. I believe 7. Now, you're talking to a seminar guy. I'm not looking for a seminar, but can you touch on them lightly and just sort of walk through either the critical steps, or if we go 7, let's go 7.
Well, I think I can do it pretty rapidly, Rob, because what we ended up doing as it came out of the research stage and started, okay, how do you share this with people? How do you help them get their mind around it? It's like, okay, we need something visual for people to see and understand. And actually, I give full credit to my wife. She said to me one night, sitting at the table, kind of talking about all these elements. She goes, well, sweetheart, isn't it just like a bridge? And like, bing, 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 the lights go off. I'm like,
darn those wives. You spend 2 years on that, and she comes up with bridge. Yes.
Well, we use the analogy of a suspension bridge because trust is complex. You know, if we had a room of 150 people, they just sit and said, okay, you know, let's play the word association. I say trust, you say, you're going to get, you know, you create a huge word cloud really, really fast, right? So it's very complex. And so again, what we had to do in the research is kind of unpack that. Okay, and what we found is there are 6 major components of trust. And if you think about it like a bridge, it goes like this. There's a foundation, and there what we're talking about are beliefs and values. Okay, so are there core ideas that really, really hold to? This is who we are, this is what we believe. That's like the foundation of the bridge. Everything has to sit on that. Then there's a substructure. The point of a substructure is to connect everything to the foundation. So here we're talking about, do you have the ability to be consistent in your practice of literally connecting your policies, your practices, your protocols, your product to what you say you are? Because if you say you're one thing and your behavior is something else, you lose trust, right? In a bridge, there's something in a suspension where they call bearings. Okay, so these you don't actually see a whole lot unless you're paying close attention. These are actually the moving parts of a bridge, and they shift based on the payload, the environment, etc. Here's the idea of trusted leaders. They have this ability to adapt, right, and contextualize. Well, more of this is the idea of adapting because they're flexible, and the only way they're flexible is they're actually involved. So it's this idea that the way you build trusted leadership is you've got to actually be involved in whatever the work is that your group is doing. Otherwise, you can't be flexible, right? So that's kind of the bearings of it. We use the analogy of the girders. Those are the beams that run underneath the bridge. Girders look different in size and length based on the bridge. And here's this idea of truly getting everything in context. There's an old saying, best practice must always be contextualized. And it's true. We in the research world, we talk a lot about best practice. But that just means in most cases, when you do A, B occurs. But not in all. And this is what trusted leaders have to do. They have to look, okay, what are best practices and what does that look like here in our unique setting? And then, so those are the girders. And then you've got the superstructure of the bridge. And here's what's the most visible element of culture, of trust, is culture. Culture, relationships, those performance or people skills, right? That's where you see that. And then the final, or the sixth component, is the deck of the bridge. This should be smooth. It should be clear. It should be simple. And here we're talking about communication skills. We're talking about skills of order and clarity. We ought to all know what lane we're in and where we're going. And the markings ought to be really, really clear. Trusted leaders take complex things and make them very simple to understand. And if you study suspension bridge construction, what you find is the deck is actually one of the most complex elements of the structure. But for the user, it's just a flat surface I'm driving over, right? It really, really simple. Right. And then the seventh element are those suspension cables. And here we then get into the nitty gritty. What holds it all together? And what are the actual specific behaviors, skill sets, and competencies that we need to be doing in each of those six components to kind of hold it all together? And that's the Trusted Bridge framework. We assess those six components, those 21 skill sets that are those suspension cables. And based on that, we're able to identify where a leader is, where a team is at, and then we can help them build a professional development plan to ensure because here's the thing, all those things have to be in place or trust falls apart, just like a bridge.
Right.
You know, you can have great beliefs, you can even have a great substructure, but if there's holes in the deck, right, you're not going to trust that bridge. And so it all has to be there. And that's the work of continually assessing, developing, mending, maintaining, protecting trust in our leadership.
Well, you walk the walk in terms of your simplicity of leaders keeping things simple. Okay, so well done. And I really do love that visualization, particularly the suspension bridge, the give to the bridge a little bit here. Okay, so let's move to business for a moment. If there are, what would be some differences, some key differences between your work with a school and I believe you're doing some consulting with businesses too. So when you step out of the school and into the business world, what, if any, changes are you doing? How are you modifying that suspension bridge?
Really, just when you look, not really modifying the bridge at all.
Okay.
Those principles are universal when it comes to leadership and leadership skills. No, it really comes down to your measurements of success. So, you know, in the school education is really an art form. You know, it's not a factory. And in fact, that's part of what we struggle with in education so much is, you know, the American traditional school system was born out of the industrial age and it is set up like a factory. You know, we group kids by manufacturing date, you know, and we really got to get away from that. And we struggle to get away from that because really we're dealing with humans that we're developing and coaching and helping them to find their unique path. That's a lot more soft, if you will, and I mean that in the sense, again, I don't want to use your scary word of soft skills, but it's
wincing.
more.
I'm wincing. Okay, keep going.
Well, in the idea that it looks different for every child is my firm belief.
Right.
To me, the best education is as differentiated as possible. You know, every child has unique ambitions, and therefore their education should look different to meet their learning needs, their learning aspirations. In a business, usually we're talking about either a product or a service that we're delivering, and it's a lot more well defined what a quality, excellent product is going to look like in the end. And so I think when we look at, okay, what are the differences in those communities that we're consulting and that we're training, that's really just a measurement of kind of what's the end game. But back to the leadership that gets us there, no, it's the same work. It's the same work.
All right, well, I'm gonna let you in a little secret. I set a trap for you and you didn't buy it. You didn't go for my trap because I think most good processes, and that's where people get confused. They think, well, then this must only work for this thing. No, listen, there's style and there's technique. Obviously, we may, you know, as you were talking with even the students, finding that unique part of the student, but the techniques that we're using aren't changing all that much. how we apply them, the style, adapting to the style of the individual, the style of the leader, that's gonna expand and contract. That process will have some minor adjustments, but again, for me, teaching sales, yeah, I teach a lot of banks how to sell and wirehouses. That's a shock to you, but I work with hospitals, I work with hostage negotiators, nurses, NASA, and people go, for selling, we're talking about influence and persuasion. I don't know how to get the Hubble fixed up there. But I know how to create, as you're doing, trust. These are certain elements that won't change all that much. Obviously, we need to marry the process to the individual or to the scenario. And that's where a good consultant comes in and says, okay, now we need to put them two together. But quite frankly, I was always very comfortable teaching process. My client's not so comfortable, but when I learned to sell at Xerox, we never got near a copier. We sold airplanes and answering machines. Why? Because the product itself was getting in the way. We wanted to focus solely on the process, and that allowed us to do that. Then we came back in and went, all right, now we'll marry the two together, but now we know how to block and tackle. The plays won't be as hard. I think sometimes we push them together, and that's what confuses people.
You nuance those principles and those practices to, again, the context of the organization, the context of whatever the work is, but the principles hold true.
Right.
And if I can give just one example, because this is one that just comes up constantly in the business world, they understand. Or most understand something that's called span of control theory. I actually prefer span of influence, but you might be familiar with those studies. And basically, it shows us how many people can a manager effectively manage. And so how many people can you, so when you're setting up your organizational structure and you're putting your teams together and your workflow, how many people can one person supervise effectively and support? Well, depending on the industry, it does vary a little bit, but the research shows us it's between maybe 6 to 10 max. But what do we do in schools? When I was a high school principal, Rob, I had 46 direct reports. I was set up for failure.
Yeah.
How do you support in a deep and meaningful and authentic way 46 people in a day? You don't.
Right.
You don't. And so this is where, when we look at the reorganization of schools, that's where they can learn from business. Business knows, and the best businesses know this. And so it's that kind of nuancing. It's like, here's the principle, but boy, how that's going to be applied here, we've got to think through maybe some paradigm shifts, some restructuring in order to, again, make the best practice work within the context of what it is the organization is and what they're doing.
Yeah. I remember learning at one point in my career what they call the 85-15 rule, which was whenever you look at any real problem that an organization is having, be it the school system or a business, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, this principal here, he's not doing the job. We got to get another one. In other words, it's obviously a people problem. But the 85-15 rule says about 85%, we're just dealing in generalities, you're looking at a process problem, not a people problem. And what you've just described is a classic process problem that people would interpret as a people problem. And so it's a classic.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let's go to something that I saw play out often. I was fortunate enough, and still do from time to time, I'll run a negotiation simulation. And I love simulations because there are different outcomes. And we have a simulation that I'll run where there's an opportunity for one group to make a deal and break the deal and get away with it. And in their mind, and there's a little bit of money on the table too, by the way, which we call that smoke creeping in. It really isn't in the handout. We do that devilishly to mess with their heads a little bit, begin to focus on the money they're going to win. But in any case, I would say a third of the time, they'll break that deal, take the money, and say, well, it's just a game. And of course, we will say, no, the last 3 hours, we've actually never used the word game. If it was a game, that's monopoly. I really don't care if you feel real good about the deal I made. but this is life. And what we try to get across to them is something bigger happened here. That's why I love simulations. Trust has just been broken.
Yeah.
And so I want to hear you talk about that a little bit, if you would. Immediately they'll say, well, but we could repair it. Talk about trust and repairing trust.
That's why, and I don't want to overly plug the book, but there, we gave a whole chapter.
Plug the book. This is okay. What's the name of that book again? I forgot.
Trust Ed, The Bridge to School Improvement. It's on Amazon.
Oh, good.
So, because sometimes what you find is it's not that even that you've broken trust, but you've inherited broken trust. So let's say you get hired into a situation where you're cleaning up a mess. Well, still, as the leader, you've got to repair the trust that was broken between, again, the owners and the employees, or the administration, and et cetera. Well, quickly and briefly, there are 4 elements, and I'll just highlight the first 2 that we find, and then the important caveat of when it doesn't work. The first thing to remember is it's going to take time. Trust is built over time. It doesn't come fast or easy. In fact, one study has shown that it takes about 7 months to build a baseline of trust between a new leader and the employees, and that's connecting with people every day. Right?
Wow.
7 months, right? So when you start talking about, okay, now we got to repair this, you've got to be in it for the long haul. And so how do you do that? It's make promises and keep them. And here, when I'm consulting or working with someone who's working on this, okay, what little promises can you make? Be public about it, and then come through within a few weeks. How many times can you deliver consistently, making a commitment to your team, keep it, make a commitment to your team, keep it. That idea, that is what builds trust. And it takes time, though. It's not going to happen quickly. A second element is you get trust by extending trust. And we've seen this over and over again. The more you extend trust to others, it comes back to you. So here's the idea of how can you empower your team? How can you get out of their way? How can you free up their lives to be as autonomous as possible? It's hire well, empower well, and support folks and trust them and model that. And there's a couple of other elements that we talk about in the book, or I talk about in the book, but the one that I always, the clarifier though in the research is there is an element that we've learned where trust simply is not repairable, and it goes like this. If you as a leader have broken trust because of a certain behavior or action that you did wrong, and even if you own it, you say, yep, I blew it, that was my mistake, and you confess it to your team, you're transparent, which is all good things to do, that trust can be repaired so long as you never do that specific action again. But what the research has shown is if you do the same behavior again, you might as well pack it up and move on. You're done.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. But I just want to trumpet what I heard you say, and I want to make sure, just in case somebody was taking a right turn and forgot to put their blinker on, is now paying attention again. Don't lose what you just heard. I love that part about little promises. I really do. I like the part about allowing them to demonstrate trust too. Really good. But I like that because I think sometimes we get a little clumsy. We get in our own way. We're trying to create a bigger promise. And quite frankly, as a former manager, I made some bigger promises. And if you put a lie detector on me, I was telling the truth. Problem is with the bigger promises, I couldn't control every element of what I was promising. I had, internal customers, as we call them in business. Yes. Other people were getting the paychecks with the same name on them, a company name on them. And I couldn't control their behavior. Problem is, I'm the one who made the promise. I'm the one who said what I said. So really, and this is what I love about a podcast like this. You're giving us things that are not overwhelmingly difficult, but really logical. And so I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna tell you that I'm gonna buy your book. And now I'm gonna buy your book. I'm gonna write a review on your book. It better be as good as this podcast. Is all I can tell you. But and anyone else listening, please remember that buying a book is a lovely thing to do for an author. But if you're in a really good mood, write that review. It means a lot to us. Okay, but I like it because again, I mentioned this 10 minutes ago. You're walking the walk. You're giving me things, you're giving us things. Sorry, I'm a little selfish here, that are easy to implement. We're not asking anybody, you're not moving any big boulders here. Those two pieces alone are gold, gold. And I'm grateful that that we rolled into it. I'm patting myself on the back because I think I asked the question, but no, really good. And just, I know I'm fawning over you. So I just still got a little more podcast to go. So you better not fumble from here, but really good. I love small, easy things to do because those are the things I will do. All right. All right. Enough fawning. Don't get big headed on me now. Okay. Tell me that. Let's shift a little bit. We're coming down the home stretch. Give me a myth about trust that you could debunk and stay hot. Right? In other words, nice and easy. What's one thing that you could debunk that we can just stop right now? Unfortunately, we can't use the big promises one. So I would have loved that one. But give me another one.
Well, maybe there's this idea that, well, I would go back to what I said earlier, Rob, I think, because I've heard it expressed so many times where people say, well, either you're trusted or you're not. All of us, we assess each other probably within the first 96 seconds of looking at each other, right? It's like we do this initial assessment. We're going to figure out, okay, where's this person at? And that happens with everybody in every situation. But that's not trust. That's just kind of this initial assessment. You think about the layers of friendship, and there's been a whole bunch of different frameworks that talk about, the different layers of relationship. To get to that level, whatever it is, level 7, where there's truly a trusted friendship, where you're willing to open up and share, your inner struggles and problems with someone, that takes time. And there's very specific things that happen. Now, sometimes in friendships, it happens sort of naturally. If you've got a chemistry with somebody, it's because, well, you have similar likes and interests, et cetera. Well, but in leadership, it is so critical for that to be intentional. I guess the myth is, if I'm charismatic enough, I'm going to have influence. We come back to the old Lee Iacocca story, right? It worked for a time, but then it stopped working, right? You have got to have an intentional plan. And here's another piece of that I always, it's so important for folks to grab a hold of, is you've got to be willing to be assessed. In other words, you've got to be able to look in the mirror and let others look at you and listen and take it. Because when we talk about trust, perception is reality.
Right. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, as you were answering it, I was thinking, boy, how would I answer that? I talk about trust, and it was a tough question. I was thinking, let's see how he handles this one. For me, I would say that here I was boasting a while ago about how Xerox will process everything. You can tie your shoe at Xerox without a process, but we had the same. When you have a process, you have a way of measuring what you're doing. When you can measure it, you can fix it. But the interesting thing about trust, and the reason why we missed it, was it's not necessarily a repeatable, predictable process. It doesn't fit into that model. There are things that influence trust. I would think the more of them that we do, the better we'll be at it. But I can't say, do these 4 things in sequence, and everybody's going to trust you. And that was almost disappointing for me, because I was such a zeroid that I couldn't believe that we couldn't really build a trust model. We couldn't do it. You built a bridge. We were looking to get something in sequence into that model, and in the end, it was more of, here are 4 things that will influence it, but we can't build a process on it.
The reason we were able to build this bridge, though, Rob, is because of some really significant research that was done. So back in the early 2000s, a meta-analysis was done. And a meta-analysis, that's just a big word for, they looked at everything. So a fellow named Robert Marzano and his team, they looked at, I think it was up to 30 years of research on school leadership and student improvement or student achievement levels. looked at every piece of research, laid it on top of each other, and looked at, okay, what were the commonalities that came out? And there they identified actually 21 specific behaviors that school leaders do. And when those behaviors are in place, well, then what my work was in my doctoral program was then looking at those 21 specific behaviors and finding the correlations with these 6 components of trust. And so what we have found, no, we do know, we do have a process, if you will. I can tell you, now you do these 21 things. Now, no one individual leader can have competency in all 21. And that's another thing we talk about. Leadership is teamwork. It's always teamwork. And so you look at, okay, in our team, are we demonstrating these 21 skill sets and abilities? Or it's perfect when you're looking to fill a spot on your team. You do this assessment and you look at, oh, you know what, we need somebody who has change management skills because none of us have that. We need to find somebody who's got more in the school world, they've got more curriculum knowledge or something of that nature. I mean, there's specific skill sets and competencies that you can look for. So we can assess a team, identify what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, that have a direct correlation to their level of trust or what's needed to add to that team. So yeah, we could probably build this for Xerox too. We just need to take a closer look at.
I'll make a couple calls. All right. Problem is the guys that I knew there are probably not there anymore. But that was when we struggled with. All right, look, the book is Trust Ed, The Bridge to School Improvement. I'm assuming we have an ebook on that one.
Yeah, sure. Yep. It's
all right. Do we have an Audible book on that one?
It's coming, and we have a Spanish version that's in translation right now. It's coming, but right now we've got just the print and the ebook are available on Amazon.
Good.
You can also find more information at trustedbook.org, or you just Google my name, Toby Travis, and that'll get you there as well.
Yeah, you're jumping on my next question, which is how do people hear and get a hold of you? So slow down. What's that website again?
So probably the easiest one is just my name, Toby, T-O-B-Y, Travis, T-R-A-V-I-S, and .org or .com will get you there. And that'll actually get you to the Trusted School site. And there are links to the book and book reviews. There's links to the assessments that we use and the training frameworks and client list and all of that. And in the book, you can just go to Amazon. And please, leave the review. And there's a few reviews have started to pop up on Goodreads, Medium, and a few other channels. And
good.
Really appreciate the reviews.
Outstanding. Well, when you see a review that has little promises in there, you'll know it's me.
Oh, no.
Listen, I'm thrilled that we had an opportunity to talk. Folks, also, please remember when you're looking for that book, it's not just, you don't have to be in the school system.
Right.
Consulting with businesses. I'm pretty sure if you just go back on what you just heard, 95% of what we were talking about is leaders, people leading. I'm quite sure you're going to be just fine, even if you're not in the school system. So grab that book. I'm going to grab it. Let's all write some reviews on that thing. And thank you so much for dropping in here and giving us such a great interview. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you again.
You bet. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.